So just noting that the Mayor and Councillor Hanford have departed our meeting to go off and represent Council at Carl's Tangi in Paikakariki, so just acknowledging that. And so for the rest of this meeting, I will step into the Chair's role for today. So let's move on in our agenda. We're going back to report number 10.1 in the agenda, which is review of coastal provisions in the district plan. I will hand it over to our staff to introduce this, so to Chris, and then we'll be looking to questions from elected members.
Kia ora. I will open the paper by saying that this follows up on a briefing we gave you in December 24, and it effectively responds to a request from you for us to bring a paper forward that would seek your resolution to approve the commencement of a review of the coastal provisions in our operative district plan, and also just to note that we'd be coming back to you with further advice as we develop the precise approach that sits beneath that, and that would of course be in consultation with key parties. And so it is a brief paper, and it just sets out the background to this piece, which you will be familiar with. I do want to just note, because we've heard in public speaking today some different information, we have had advice from our external legal advisors on this paper and the contents of it and the requirements. You know that we've also been talking to DOC and MFE. It's very much focused on their statutory requirements, and it includes information that we were advised was important to let you know about. So I just want to preface what you would have already read with that statement for clarity, and to note that when we come back to you with the proposed work program and what needs to happen, it will set out fuller detail. And what do I precisely mean by that? In paragraph 10, it talks about an interval of 5 years and an interval of 10 years requirements. We're not commenting on how big, small, or the magnitude of scale of what needs to be done in this meeting. We'll come back to you on that. So it could be, as suggested in paragraph 12, that some of the work that's required is actually quite small. We still need to undertake the process though. Those processes are set legislatively, and as you'd expect, we will be proposing to you that we follow those requirements. And we can give you more information on why we have to do that and what happens when you don't, when we come back to you. But I just wanted to start with that. So take the paper as read. It's a very simple paper today. We're asking you to approve that we do kickstart into the review of our coastal provisions, and to note that we'd come back to you. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Chris. Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So we heard quite a bit from the Salima the Crew, Chair of Crew, in particular around section 35, the view is that that's not a statutory requirement. Can you tell us whether it's a statutory requirement or not in terms of the progressing the RMA coastal planning?
What I'm going to reiterate to you is paragraph 10 and the reference to section 35 and section 79 of the RMA are set out on the basis of legal advice, and I'll say confirmation of requirements before we put this forward to you. So I'm comfortable that it is part of the process that's set out legislatively. You want to add to that, Jace? No? Comfortable with that statement.
Okay, great. Thank you. So in respect to the objectives that Salima spoke to earlier, and you're both, I think you both listened to Salima, so I won't go over what she said. But it was her view that the only objective that was outstanding was objective D, and the other work is already operative in district planning. Is that, so the review this review that we're going to do, or if it gets signed off today, will that just be reviewing the objective under D, or is it looking at all of the other objectives in the...
I think the paper that you have before you today is saying or requesting that we kickstart, and we're saying to you in B that we are going to come back to you and say, here's the work that we think is required. We're going to look at all the requirements and what it takes and a suggested way forward. I think we've previously spoken to you, and you know this, about Dr. DeLonghi's new report that you've seen. We also had Jacob's. We've already committed to doing some work to unpack some of those things. So the reason I mention that is we're proposing to come back to you after we've talked to interested parties to say, hey, look, here's what we think needs to be done and what it takes and how long and all the rest of it. So we're not going to put that on the table today, but we will be coming back to you. You have anything to add?
Great. So there was a request or a direction, what did you think was a motion from the Strategy and Ops, if we can just find it, to a request that council staff prioritise progressing RMA Schedule 1 coastal plan change. So is this work, this review that you'd like to undertake, does it progress the RMA 1 schedule plan change? Or
Correct.
Does it not? It does.
It does.
Okay, so it's your view, sorry, the council's view, that this is a requirement to progress that work.
Yes, on the basis of our discussions with the Ministry of the Environment and DOC, and also the advice we've had from external legal advisors, we're making sure that we're undertaking the things that are required for this process.
Great. The review that you're seeking today, the review in the motion, how long do you expect, what's your expected time of completing that work? The review itself. I'm talking about the coastal plan change, the review.
I'm going to say, if, as an example, we thought of the plan change we progressed with PC2, you can expect a normal plan change to take around 2 years, and that's not to get to notification, it's the process as a whole. As you guys are familiar with, we do things like set up hearings panels, and people are able to submit. There's the whole process you step through, and that's what we'll be coming back and talking to you about. We're hoping that the way that we can, I'm going to say innovatively, I think is a word we've been talking about, think about the upfront part of our drafting to get to notification, that we can make it as streamlined as possible. So we're hopeful that as we work with parties, we can work that out together.
Okay, and one last question, if I may. Mm-hmm. So whilst this review is being undertaken, if it's signed off today, there's other work streams progressing the coastal plan change that runs alongside it, or does that sort of slow down and stop while the review's get done? Have we got the resources to do just this, or is there other things progressing alongside it?
We notified you last year that we had gone out to tender for a planner for this plan change. So some of the items that are noted here as part of that review, there's already some drafting and scoping of what's required. We're not expecting this work to take I have to say this carefully. This is not a 40-month piece of work that we're talking about here. We're making sure that we tick all the boxes and consider all the things that need to be done to make sure that you get the best advice, so that the district as a whole, when we come through with a draft for notification, has the best draft to consider or option to consider as we push forward. So to answer your question, we already have someone in place. We had notified key stakeholders that we were doing that. We have offered to, even with the Section 35, engage and work together on that. From our perspective, it is part of the good practice that is set out under the RMA for requirements. Do you want to add to that, Jace?
Yeah, if I could just make a couple of observations, particularly around timing. And the main one is we'll see you in April with actually proper advice about that. There are a lot of factors at play, moving parts in this space, which we will help you to understand, I guess, in April when we bring that advice to you. And I'll just raise one of them today so that you're aware of it, and that is how much work is being done in central government on national direction on natural hazards. There is some fundamental reviews going on of the national policy statement for natural hazards that was proposed but never put into place. There is talk of reviewing the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. Those are the higher level documents that are going to have a massive influence, not just on what this district does in terms of its district plan and natural hazards, but on what all districts and cities do across the country. And when we do come back to you with advice on timeframes in April, we're going to need to give you some advice around how best to sync council's work with the timeframes of those processes, because you can get caught with your pants down if you are partway through a plan change process and you find that the direction that you're endeavouring to give effect to changes. And so that's the sort of thing that we want to help you understand through some thorough advice in April on timeframes. Thanks.
So in April, do you think there'll be a timeline, a work program to progress the schedule change?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Coe.
My question may be redundant after all that, but I just wanted to really get a response as to whether Salima's concerns about focus, your scope and timeliness have been taken into account. And she also recommended not proceeding with recommendation B. And I just wondered if you had a response to that. So that's two things, you know.
I might just kick off and say, just to reiterate, we're ensuring that we get advice on the steps that we need to take, which would be normal practice for us. We're very careful in the way that we push forward, because we want to make sure that we do what's required. Secondly, recommendation B for us was the commitment to come back and share publicly the approach that we're proposing to take. As you know, with previous plan changes, we need to seek your approval to do things.
Yeah.
It's part of the legislative settings. So if we don't put that in, we'll still have to come back in April to seek your agreement.
Just wanted to clarify that for the public speaker as much as anything else. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Coe. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, so it strikes me if you take B out, you're actually going to get hammered for keeping everybody in the dark. So it's kind of, you can't win that one. Just wondered, under with section 79(1), with the hazards, and that's what we heard about, the hazards. So in the section 35, in that review, can you prioritise specifically 79(1)? Can you say, okay, look, as a priority, we're going to go hazards, or is there a broader plan? That's the first question. The second one is, in April, have you got, it's a piece of string, I know, but is there an indication of what the timeline might be? 2 years is the number that's still ringing in my head.
Yeah, and look, if you wouldn't mind me just clarifying, I think what Chris, when she was talking about 2 years, was reflecting on Plan Change 2. Plan Change 2 was actually done under different legislation, and whether affected councils wanted to or not, they got pressed really hard by central government to move really fast. And I think elected members all around the country will probably be thinking whether or not that was, in the end, the best result for communities everywhere. But leaving that to one side, the Section 35 review would absolutely have a focus on the provisions which are the 1999 operative district plan provisions that live on because of the decisions in the 2010s, 2014 and 2017 specifically, to withdraw those natural hazard provisions that were initially notified for the coast in 2012. But we will be coming back in April with more advice on scope. We are aware of some other elements of the coastal environment chapter that are potentially creating some issues, and based on information that we have may not necessarily be where they need to be. So we'll be giving you advice on all of that in April.
And I just wanted to say, I can't think of a single area of council that has, to talk about hazards, that is more hazardous than the planning area, where you guys are subject to national policy statements and regional policy statements and all sorts of directions and changes of government and changes of priority, and you get halfway through what you're doing. So I think sometimes the public think, oh, they're just kicking the can down the road. I don't think that's a fair reflection, to be honest. You are having to deal with complex legislation and changes of government. There's going to be another change next year, of course, obviously, and then that might change the direction again. So, I mean, people just need to be aware that that is the reality. I don't think it. I really admire Salima's stickability with this and has an enormous amount of knowledge. I'm just not sure I agree with the idea that somehow there's a delaying tactic here. For the life of me, I can't see that. I just think there's a process, and I know how vexed it is. So I just wanted to make a note of that.
Thank you for that observation, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. I just want to clarify something. So when Chris was asked whether or not we needed to do the Section 35, she agreed that it was part of the process. I'm not sure where she's gone.
Sorry, Councillor Pravanov. Chris has asked for leave of the chair to move on. She has another appointment
Right.
that is of she's already running late for, so
Okay.
she has departed or has walked back in. But she is on her way to leave. So
Okay.
any questions you have can be answered by Mr. Holland.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, what parts of that Section 35 have already been completed?
Sure. Let me firstly begin by maybe just slightly demystifying Section 35, because it's whenever you're just referring to a section in law, nobody really usually knows what the heck it is you're talking about. A Section 35 review is basically doing due diligence. How well have the provisions worked over time? Now, in terms of the 1999 operative district plan provisions that still live on, it is correct. I believe Salima mentioned it from memory, that there's already been some decisions made previous to 2012, and correct me, my mistake if I've got this wrong, that has led to people arriving at the point that those provisions weren't fit for purpose. That's why there was a proposed different set of provisions back in 2012, and we all know how that played out. But we've been implementing those provisions for about another 10 years since we withdrew in 2014 the major bulk of those proposed replacement provisions. Why I say all that is we've had 10 more years to learn about how those provisions haven't been working that well, and I would be hopeful that looking into that we might find a few things that we might learn from. That's really what a Section 35 review is. Now, it is that is certainly a overdue task for those provisions. That is because they were withdrawn in 2014, so it's certainly been 5 years since 2014. When it comes to the rest of the coastal environment chapter, and I think this is, again, Salima's point, well, they're not that old, so the deadline hasn't kicked in yet. And I would accept that actually the deadline for that is 2026 to do the report for those other provisions. The thing with planning is that to some extent everything's connected, and so when we give you some advice in April, it will include looking at a whole of chapter review, because sometimes it can be that you wished you'd had that scope when you're partway through a review and you'd narrowed yourself to this much. Now, I do hear the concerns that are being raised about, is that going to slow things down? And again, our advice in April is going to make this clearer for you. But ahead of that, I would say, I would be highly surprised if that's going to take longer than it will take central government to figure out what this new national direction will look like and put that into place. So I think that's probably going to be a real factor for council to consider in April. That's the thing that you're really going to have to think, do we want to move ahead of that? And if you were to decide in April that that's actually something you'd like to see as a settled thing before you get too far in this process, I'm pretty confident that the Section 35 review can be well and truly completed within that envelope without slowing anything down. But I'm getting ahead of myself because this is all about April now.
Thank you.
Sorry, there's no other questions, so thank you for that. Sorry, Miss Councillor Cooper, you come back for a second bite.
Yeah, no, I was just musing on what Jason just said. With the short 3-year span of central government, it'd probably be fair to say that no matter what policy or regulation that we're reviewing, whether it be land transport or RMA or coastal or whatever, we're always in that flux, aren't we? So at some point, and this will be probably for April to discuss, as you mentioned, but at some point, you can't wait for central government. Otherwise, we'll be here in 10 years, waiting for another change of government. Is that, just to comment on that, Jason?
I agree. You've got to pick a point at which you're going to jump. For example, there's talk about this government putting in a replacement RMA. You remember they repealed the Natural and Built Environment Act and the Spatial Planning Act. That was the last government's attempt to replace the RMA. So that they have actually talked about putting in a new bill, and I think they've talked about maybe trying to get it in or starting to talk about it by the end of this year, or is it, maybe even next year, possibly. I'm not suggesting for a moment that you would want to wait that long. I think our advice in April is going to say there is work that we know of that's going to come out in the next few months that will take some time to land and be finalised. And I would anticipate the advice saying that's the thing you want to know about that's settled. That's a major factor. But yes, I agree with you. The pendulum swings in this area, and it's actually swung in the last few years a lot more than it did in the past. I could rant and rave about that for a while, but I won't.
Thank you, Jason. All right, there's no other questions, so we'll move to the recommendations in the report. We've got A and B. Do we have anyone who would be willing to move those? Councillor Halliday moving. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Coe seconding. Right of introduction.
No, pretty much all covered. Jason, again, just comment how you make complex things sound very simple. And Selima, thank you very much for coming in and bringing this to the attention. I know that there is meetings scheduled to work through these questions and scenarios, and I certainly appreciate, certainly from coming from the last triennium, this pendulum that swings backwards and forwards with regards to making it very, very difficult to progress these things. But the line in the sand does need to be drawn at some point. As such, no, that's me.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I just wanted to, in 18 and 19, in reference to Mana Whenua, I just can't let this pass. I really want to repudiate the appalling personal attack on a member this morning during public speaking whose input is enormously valued and who is an ethical and highly respected person. Mana Whenua's input into these things is really valued. I was on Greater Wellington Regional Council for 9 years. Those councils, all of those regional councils, used to be called Environment. It was Environment Wellington, Environment Waikato, etc. The environment was at the centre of everything. That's not a bad place to be. And the fact that we have somebody who is a consistent reminder of that at council meetings, I think it's a hugely valuable thing. And I took great resentment at that. I will castigate myself for not having stood up at the time and said this is bollocks and it's got to stop. But anyway, I've said it now.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other comments to debate? No? Okay, so I'll put
Yeah, sorry, just quickly.
Councillor Cooper.
I have said for a while that I think the coastal plan change is an absolute priority for our community, and I think we've seen from the motion that was passed in Strategy and Ops, asking for the council to focus as a priority that plan change, and having spoken to Darren and Chris as well, I feel that's the case, and if this progresses that work into good policy, and it's a requirement of that policy, then it obviously makes sense to support it. But yeah, I think we all hope that we can progress this as expediently and efficiently as possible, and if there's hybrid models to do that, then that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Cooper. I'll just add my thoughts here. I think it's great having you around the table, Coops, because you do keep this front of mind for us, and whenever it comes up, remind us we need to keep this progressing. So I think we're all aware that this is an area that's fraught. There is high emotion and high stuff within our community interest, and so we'll keep tabs on this pretty closely, I think, as a table. So I would also echo Councillor Wilson's comments about comments against one of our people around this table. I think that was inappropriate, and I will second your comments around that as well. So on that note, there's a right of a reply for Councillor Halliday.
Sort of ways, but just endorsing what was being said about our individual at the table and their treatment this morning, and Coops, yep, keeping it on front and centre. But no, that's me.
Okay, so we'll put those two recommendations, A and B, in report 10.1 to the vote. All those in favour, aye. Those against? That is carried. Thank you. Right, moving on in our agenda. Just turn over the page. Confirmation of minutes, item number 11. So these are confirming the minutes of our council meeting from the 12th of December 2024, which I'm sure you all remember vividly, especially after remembering the minutes. So can I have a mover for confirmation of those minutes, please? Councillor Wilson, seconded. Councillor Warwick, thank you. Sorry, Shelley. All those in favour? Against? Okay, great. That's carried as well. Now we need to move into public excluded, so I'll have a mover for that motion to move into public excluded. Councillor Warwick, seconded. Councillor Cofford. Oh, you're waving goodbye. Okay, sorry. Seconded by Councillor Cofford. All in favour? Against? That's carried. So we'll move into public excluded and wait for the live stream to get turned off. Thank you, team. Switch the agenda.